Secret societies. Do they really control the world? Somewhere, right now, a decision is being made. You will never know who made it. You will never know where the room was. You will never see the names on the document. But you will feel its effects. In your taxes, in the news cycle, in the price of bread, in the laws that appear, quietly, without anyone quite remembering how they started. This is not a theory. This is simply how power has always worked. What is a theory, and one of the most persistent theories in human history, is what happens inside that room. Who is sitting there? Are they elected? Are they accountable? Or are they something else entirely? The idea that a small, hidden group of people secretly controls the world is not new. It is not fringe. It has appeared in ancient Rome, in medieval Europe, in the pamphlets of the American Revolution, in the Cold War, in the age of the Internet. It is never fully gone away. And perhaps the most uncomfortable question is not, is it true? The most uncomfortable question is, why does it keep coming back? What does it say about power and about us that this idea survives every generation, every debunking, every scandal, and every century? That is what this documentary is about. Not to prove the theory, not to dismiss it, but to follow it. Step by step, fact by fact, question by question, until we reach the place where the evidence stops and the mystery begins. Let us begin with what we can confirm. Secret societies are real. That sentence alone already complicates the conversation, because many people assume the entire concept is fictional, a product of Hollywood, of overactive imaginations. It is not. The Bavarian Illuminati. On May 1st, 1776, the same year the United States declared independence, a man named Adam Weishaupt founded a secret organization in Ingolstadt, Bavaria. He was a professor of law at the University of Ingolstadt. He was 28 years old.
He was deeply opposed to the influence of the Catholic Church on public life and education. He called his group the Order of the Illuminati, from the Latin illuminatus, meaning enlightened. The group's original goals, as documented in historical records, were opposition to superstition and religious influence in governance, promotion of Enlightenment ideals, reason, science, secrecy in service of philosophical progress, the gradual infiltration of positions of power by members who shared these ideals. At its peak, the Illuminati had somewhere between 650 and 2,500 members, depending on the source. Members included intellectuals, politicians, and reformers. Some historians believe the composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart may have had connections to associated circles, though this remains disputed. In 1785, less than a decade after its founding, the Bavarian government outlawed the Illuminati. The Elector of Bavaria, Charles Theodore, issued a series of edicts banning secret societies, following the exposure of the group through internal leaks and the confiscation of documents from a deceased member named Xavier Zwack. Those documents, real, historical, verified, described plans for social reform through covert means. By 1790, most historians agree, the original Illuminati had dissolved. That is the historical record. That is what we can confirm. What happened next, in the imagination of the world, is a separate story entirely. The Freemasons. The Freemasons are perhaps the most famous secret society in Western history, and unlike the Illuminati, they did not dissolve. Freemasonry traces its origins to the medieval guilds of stonemasons and cathedral builders in Europe. The transition from operative masonry, actual construction, to speculative masonry, philosophical and symbolic practice, is generally dated to the 17th century. In 1717, 4 lodges in London united to form the first Grand Lodge of England.
From there, Freemasonry spread across Europe and then the world. At the height of its influence in the 18th and 19th centuries, the Freemasons counted among their members George Washington, the first President of the United States, Benjamin Franklin, Mozart, again, Voltaire, Simón Bolívar, the liberator of South America, and many, many others. The symbolism of Freemasonry is everywhere in public life, so much so that most people encounter it without realizing it. The all-seeing eye on the American $1 bill, the unfinished pyramid, compass and square motifs on public buildings, the layout of Washington, D.C. itself, which some researchers claim contains deliberate Masonic geometric patterns, though this is disputed by historians and urban planners alike. The Freemasons are not, by any modern standard, a particularly powerful political force. They are a fraternal organization. They have charitable arms. They have lodges in most major cities. They have rituals and degrees and symbolic ceremonies. But they also have, and this is important, a culture of secrecy. Members have historically sworn oaths of silence. Lodge proceedings are not public. Certain degrees of membership are not disclosed to the uninitiated. This secrecy, however mundane its actual content may be, creates a perception problem. And perception, as we will see, is one of the most powerful forces in the story of secret societies. Skull and Bones. In 1832, a secret society was founded at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. It is called Skull and Bones. Its existence is not a theory. It is documented, confirmed, and openly acknowledged, including by its own members. What is less openly discussed is the nature of its influence. Every year, 15 Yale seniors are tapped, selected for membership in the society. They are given a room in a building called the Tomb, a windowless stone structure on the Yale campus. Their initiation rituals are not public.
Their discussions are not recorded. Or, if they are, those records are not available. Among the confirmed members of Skull and Bones across its history, President William Howard Taft, President George H.W. Bush, President George W. Bush, Senator John Kerry, who ran against George W. Bush in 2004, meaning both major party presidential candidates in that election were members of the same secret society. This is not speculation. Both men confirmed their membership during that campaign. When journalist Tim Russert asked both candidates about their shared membership on Meet the Press, Kerry said, "It's so secret I can't say anything about it." Bush said, "It's a secret." Two men competing for the most powerful office in the world. Same secret society. Same year. No charges have been made here. No accusations. Just the facts, as documented in public record.
The Bilderberg Group. Founded in 1954 at the Hotel de Bilderberg in the Netherlands, this is an annual conference that brings together approximately 120 to 150 of the most influential people in the world. Political leaders, CEOs, intelligence officials, media executives, central bankers. For decades, the Bilderberg Group held its meetings with no press releases, no public agenda, and no official communiques. The meetings were not secret in the sense that they were hidden. Attendees were known. But their discussions were, and to a significant degree still are, held under the so-called Chatham House rule. What is said in the room cannot be attributed to any speaker. Today, the Bilderberg Group publishes a partial list of attendees and a general list of topics, but no transcripts, no minutes, no recordings. The stated purpose is to promote dialogue between Europe and North America. Critics argue the actual purpose is to coordinate global policy beyond the reach of democratic oversight. These are the facts. What they mean, that depends on who you ask. And now we arrive at the cracks.
The places where the official narrative, whether from historians, governments, or the organizations themselves, doesn't quite close. Where questions remain that haven't been answered, or haven't been asked loudly enough. The disappearing documents. When the Bavarian Illuminati was dissolved in 1785, the government confiscated a significant volume of internal documents from the group's couriers and members. These documents, some of which have been studied by historians, described an organization with a sophisticated structure, inner circles within inner circles, code names, and explicit plans to place members in positions of governmental and ecclesiastical power. One document, reportedly titled Einige Originalschriften des Illuminatenordens, some original writings of the Illuminati order, was published by the Bavarian court to warn the public. But historians note that only a fraction of the total materials were ever made public. What was in the rest? The Bavarian state archives contain records, some of which have been accessed by researchers, some of which remain in restricted collections. No confirmed conspiracy here, but a notable silence. The network effect. One of the recurring anomalies in the study of elite power is not secrecy itself, but density. When researchers map the social networks of the world's most powerful individuals, politicians, bankers, CEOs, intelligence chiefs, certain patterns emerge. They attend the same universities. They belong to the same clubs. They sit on each other's boards. They fund each other's campaigns. They rotate through the same revolving doors between government and private industry. The World Economic Forum publishes its guest list. The Bilderberg Group, as noted, now publishes a partial attendee list. The Trilateral Commission, founded in 1973 by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski, publishes its membership. None of these organizations hide that they exist.
What they do not publish, and what no outside party can independently verify, is what is actually decided in those rooms. And the question that anomaly raises is not, are they conspiring? It is, does it matter whether they call it a conspiracy, if the outcomes are the same? The symbol problem. In 1935, the all-seeing eye above the unfinished pyramid was added to the American $1 bill. This design, known as the Eye of Providence, has roots in Christian iconography and had been used in various forms since the Renaissance. It appears above the entrance to many churches in Europe, but it also appears prominently in Freemasonic symbolism. The designer of the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States, which features this imagery, was William Barton. The process of finalizing the Great Seal involved multiple committees over several years. Several of the founding fathers involved in the process were documented Freemasons. The official explanation from the U.S. Department of State is that the Eye of Providence represents the watchful eye of God over the new nation. This explanation is plausible. It is consistent with 18th century Christian symbolism, but it does not explain, and no government source has directly addressed, why this specific symbol, shared with Freemasonic tradition, was chosen over other available Christian iconography. It may mean nothing, or it may be one of many data points that, when assembled, create a picture that asks to be looked at more carefully. The timing of policy. In 2008, a global financial crisis devastated economies across the world. Millions lost their homes. Trillions in wealth disappeared. Unemployment spiked in every major economy. Within weeks, not months, not years, central banks around the world, in separate countries with separate governments and separate mandates, began implementing remarkably similar emergency policies. Near zero interest rates, quantitative easing programs,
Emergency liquidity injections into the banking system. The coordination was explained as a rational response to shared economic conditions. And it may have been exactly that. But it also happened to benefit, overwhelmingly, the same financial institutions whose speculative behavior had contributed to the crisis in the first place. No charges are made here. No villain is named. But the question stands. In a world of competing national interests, competing political ideologies, and competing economic philosophies, how did so many powerful actors arrive at such similar solutions so quickly? And who, if anyone, was in the room when that direction was chosen? Here is where we must be precise. Everything in this section is a theory, not established fact, not proven. These are ideas that exist and must be treated as ideas. The New World Order. New World Order is a phrase, not an organization. It appears in political speeches, most famously in a 1991 address by President George H.W. Bush, who used it to describe what he saw as a new era of global cooperation following the end of the Cold War. It appears in academic literature on international relations. It appears in United Nations documentation on global governance frameworks. In conspiracy theory circles, however, New World Order refers to something very different, a hypothetical shadow government composed of the world's wealthiest and most powerful individuals that is systematically working toward a single, centralized global government with total control over economies, militaries, and populations. Theorists who believe in this framework point to several developments as evidence: the gradual expansion of international institutions, the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, as the architecture of centralized global control, the erosion of national sovereignty through trade agreements that supersede domestic law,
The increasing power of unelected technocratic bodies, central banks, regulatory agencies that operate without direct democratic oversight, microchipping, digital currency, and surveillance technology as tools of future population control. Some people believe that organizations like the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, and the Council on Foreign Relations serve as the planning committees for this agenda. There is no confirmed evidence that any of these organizations coordinate policy toward a single global government. The organizations themselves explicitly deny this. Most political scientists who have studied these groups describe them as forums for elite networking and consensus building, influential, but not conspiratorial in the way theorists describe. But the theory persists, partly because some of its observations about power concentration, elite networks, and the democratic deficit in global institutions touch on things that are demonstrably true. The difficulty is in separating those truths from the conclusions layered on top of them. The modern Illuminati. The original Bavarian Illuminati dissolved by 1790, or, as some theorists would say, went underground. The modern Illuminati conspiracy theory holds that the organization did not end. It adapted. It merged with or infiltrated Freemasonry. It extended its network across the Atlantic,
and it has been operating in the shadows ever since, steering wars, engineering economic cycles, selecting which politicians rise and which fall. The entertainment industry is frequently cited in this version of the theory. Certain music videos, award show performances, and film imagery are analyzed for Illuminati symbolism. The triangle over the eye, the one-eyed pose, the all-seeing eye gesture. Many of these images do appear with striking frequency in mainstream entertainment.
The question of whether their appearance reflects deliberate messaging, organic cultural adoption of visually striking symbols, or pattern recognition by viewers looking for confirmation is genuinely unanswered. Artists like Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Lady Gaga, and Rihanna have all been the subject of these theories. None of these accusations are verifiable. All of them have been denied by those accused, and it must be stated clearly, there is no credible evidence linking any contemporary musician or entertainer to an organized secret society engaged in global control. But the visual language of power, mystery, and occult symbolism in popular culture is real. Where it comes from and what it means is a legitimate cultural question, even if the conspiratorial answer is not supported by evidence. The bloodline theory. A separate but related theory holds that global power is not exercised through organizations at all, but through families, specifically through a small number of dynastic bloodlines, often cited as including the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Morgans, and a handful of European royal houses, who have maintained their grip on global finance and politics across centuries. It must be said, clearly and without ambiguity, the Rothschild family conspiracy theory has a long and deeply troubling history as a vehicle for anti-Semitism. The claim that Jewish banking families secretly control the world is one of the most damaging and deadly conspiracy theories in recorded history. It fueled pogroms, persecution, and ultimately contributed to the ideological framework of the Holocaust. That historical reality does not mean that inherited wealth and dynastic power are not real phenomena. They are. The concentration of generational wealth is documented and measurable, but the leap from wealthy families have outsized influence to a secret bloodline controls human civilization is not supported by evidence.
And the history of who has been targeted by that theory and why demands that it be approached with extraordinary care. The breakaway civilization. One of the more elaborate modern theories suggests that a group within the world's most powerful governments, intelligence agencies, military-industrial complexes, has, over the past 70 years, secretly developed technologies so advanced that they constitute an entirely separate civilization operating alongside the public one. This theory often invokes the alleged reverse engineering of non-human technology following events like the Roswell crash of 1947, which the U.S. Air Force officially attributes to a classified surveillance balloon. Programs like MK Ultra, which was real, documented, and deeply disturbing, as evidence that government agencies are willing to conduct radical experiments far outside legal and ethical norms. The so-called black budget, classified government spending that does not appear in public financial disclosures, as funding for these hidden programs. The U.S. government's black budget is, in fact, real and documented in principle, though its contents are classified. MK Ultra was real, a CIA program that subjected unwitting civilians and prisoners to psychological experimentation, including the administration of LSD, without consent. Its existence was confirmed in 1977 Senate hearings. These are facts. The extrapolations built upon them are theories. Where one ends and the other begins is not always easy to see, which is, perhaps, the most unsettling thing about this entire subject. Let us now apply the same rigor to the explanations that we applied to the anomalies. Because the skeptical case against the idea of a world-controlling secret society is, in many ways, as interesting as the case for it. The coordination problem. The most fundamental challenge to any global conspiracy theory is what researchers call the coordination problem.
The larger a secret, the more people must keep it. The more people who must keep a secret, the more likely it is to leak. A 2016 paper by Oxford University physicist David Grimes attempted to mathematically model the probability that large-scale conspiracies could remain secret over time. His model, using the NSA surveillance program, which leaked through Edward Snowden, the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, which was exposed after 40 years, and other historical examples, concluded that conspiracies involving more than a few hundred people tend to become public within a few years. For a conspiracy involving hundreds of thousands of people, as some global theories would require, the probability of maintaining secrecy for decades approaches zero. This does not mean that smaller, tighter conspiracies are impossible. It means that the scale often attributed to secret societies strains mathematical plausibility. The cockroach theory of history. Historians often note that the simplest explanation for why powerful people coordinate is not conspiracy, but interest. People with similar economic interests tend to make similar decisions. Banks protect banks. Oil companies lobby together. Defense contractors align around shared regulatory preferences. This is not a secret. It happens in public. It is called lobbying, or regulatory capture, or elite consensus, and it is documented in academic literature, in political science and economics. The appearance of coordination, the similarity of policies across different governments, the rotation of individuals between powerful institutions can be explained, in most cases, by shared education, shared economic interests, and shared cultural frameworks. Not a hidden hand, a very visible one that most people simply aren't looking at. The pattern recognition problem. Human beings are, neurologically, pattern recognition machines.
We evolved to see faces in clouds, to hear words in wind, to detect agency behind events. Because for most of human evolutionary history, that tendency kept us alive. The lion that appears to stalk you is more dangerous than the one that randomly crosses your path. Assuming agency, even where none exists, was a survival strategy. In the modern world, this same cognitive tendency produces what psychologists call apophenia, the spontaneous perception of connections and patterns in unrelated things. When people look for Illuminati symbols, they find them because the human visual system is extraordinarily good at finding symbols once it is primed to look for them. The triangle is one of the most structurally fundamental shapes in geometry. The eye is one of the most culturally universal symbols in human history. Their appearance together in art, architecture, and media
does not require a conspiracy to explain. It requires an understanding of how symbols propagate through culture. The conspiracy theory industry. There is, it should be noted, a significant commercial ecosystem built around conspiracy theories. Books, podcasts, YouTube channels, merchandise. The idea that secret societies control the world is not merely a belief. It is a product. It is sold, packaged, and marketed to an audience that finds meaning, community, and identity in it. This does not mean that everyone who engages with these ideas is naive or deceived, but it does mean that the incentive structure around conspiracy theories does not exclusively favor truth. It favors engagement, clicks, subscriptions. The most frightening theory, the one that keeps people watching, is not always the most accurate one. The institutional explanation. Political scientists who study global governance offer a different framework entirely.
Organizations like the Bilderberg Group, the World Economic Forum, and the Trilateral Commission are best understood, in this view, as coordination mechanisms for a global capitalist class, not a shadowy conspiracy, but a reasonably well-documented phenomenon called transnational elite networks. Sociologist C. Wright Mills described something similar in his 1956 book, The Power Elite, a study of how military, corporate, and political leaders in America formed an interlocking directorate of shared interest and mutual reinforcement. His argument was not that they met in secret rooms and issued hidden commands. His argument was that their shared background, shared schools, shared clubs, and shared economic interests caused them to make decisions, independently and collectively, that served each other's interests far more reliably than they served the public's. That argument, 50-year-old, academically grounded, and supported by extensive data, is arguably more disturbing than the conspiracy version, because it requires no villain, no secret room, no dramatic revelation, just the slow, structural accumulation of advantage by those who already have it. We have now presented the facts. We have presented the anomalies. We have presented the theories, clearly labeled. We have presented the explanations. And yet, for millions of people around the world, none of that is enough. The doubt persists. Why? This is not a simple question, and dismissing those who hold these beliefs as irrational is not only condescending, it is analytically wrong. The trust deficit. To believe the official explanation, you must trust the institutions providing it. That trust has taken significant damage over the past century. The Tuskegee syphilis study, in which the U.S. Public Health Service deliberately withheld treatment from black men with syphilis for 40 years in order to study the disease's progression, was not a theory. It happened. It was confirmed. It ended in 1972.
Operation Paperclip, in which the U.S. government secretly recruited Nazi scientists after World War II, concealing their pasts, was not a theory. It happened. It was declassified. MK Ultra, in which the CIA experimented on unwitting civilians with mind-altering substances, was not a theory. It happened. It was confirmed in Senate hearings in 1977. COINTELPRO, in which the FBI conducted covert operations to discredit and disrupt civil rights leaders, including Martin Luther King Jr., was not a theory. It happened. Documents proving it were obtained and made public. The Iran-Contra affair, in which members of the Reagan administration secretly sold weapons to Iran in violation of an arms embargo and used the proceeds to fund Nicaraguan rebels in violation of congressional prohibition, was not a theory. It happened. It was investigated. People were convicted. These are facts, and they establish beyond reasonable question that governments at the highest levels are capable of conducting significant operations in secret for years that violate both law and the stated values of democratic governance. Given that record, is it irrational to wonder what else might be happening? That is a question worth sitting with. The complexity problem. The modern world is extraordinarily complex. Supply chains, financial derivatives, algorithm-driven markets, international regulatory frameworks, neural networks making decisions that affect millions of people without any single human fully understanding why. When something goes wrong in a system this complex, and things go wrong constantly, it can be very difficult to explain. Who caused the 2008 financial crisis? The answer involves thousands of actors across multiple continents over a period of decades. Why did food prices spike in 2022? The answer involves a pandemic, a war in Ukraine, energy policy, climate change, speculative commodity trading, and logistical bottlenecks. These are not satisfying answers.
They are accurate answers. But human beings do not naturally find complex, systemic explanations satisfying. We find them exhausting. The conspiracy theory offers something that systemic analysis cannot. A face, a name, an enemy, a room where the decision was made. That clarity, even if false, is psychologically powerful. The Cold War and its aftermath. For more than 4 decades, the world was divided between two superpowers, engaged in a covert war of ideology, intelligence, propaganda, and proxy conflict. During this period, it was literally true that governments were running secret programs, funding covert operations, manipulating media, assassinating foreign leaders, conducting psychological warfare on their own populations. The Church Committee hearings of the mid-1970s, which exposed the CIA's assassination plots, surveillance programs, and domestic operations, revealed a government that was doing, in secret, exactly what conspiracy theories had claimed it was doing. When the evidence confirms that the government was, in fact, doing something that sounds like a conspiracy theory, the credibility of future conspiracy theories increases. That is not illogical. That is Bayesian reasoning, updating your probability estimate based on evidence. The problem is that people update upward, toward suspicion, but rarely update downward, toward reassessment, when new evidence fails to confirm the theory. The identity function. Finally, and this may be the most important factor
of all. Conspiracy theories serve a social and psychological function that has nothing to do with whether they are true. Believing in a secret society that controls the world gives the believer a sense of special knowledge. I see what others cannot. A community of fellow believers, a tribe united by shared understanding. An explanation for personal and collective suffering. This was done to us. A sense of moral clarity. Clear villains. Clear victims.
A narrative of resistance. We are fighting back. These functions are not trivial. In a world where many people feel powerless, economically precarious, culturally displaced, and politically ignored, the conspiracy narrative offers something that mainstream institutions frequently fail to provide: meaning. That does not make the theories true, but it does explain why evidence alone is rarely sufficient to dislodge them. Because the theory is not only doing epistemic work, it is doing emotional work, spiritual work, social work. To dismantle the theory without addressing the conditions that make it necessary is to solve the symptom without treating the disease. Let us stop for a moment. Let us look at what we see every day. The pyramid on the dollar bill, 13 steps, an unfinished apex, an eye that watches, the layout of Washington, D.C., whose diagonal avenues, when mapped, are said by some to contain Masonic compass and square geometry. The obelisks, in Washington, in London, in Paris, in Rome, ancient Egyptian symbols of the sun god Ra. Now standing in the capitals of Western power, the owl, associated with Minerva, goddess of wisdom, said to appear hidden in the street grid of Washington, visible only from above. The torch, held by the Statue of Liberty, by the figure at the top of the Arc de Triomphe, by the Olympics, by countless monuments across the Western world. The all-seeing eye, on churches, yes, but also on bank buildings, on government seals, on corporate logos. These symbols were chosen by someone, at some point, for some reason. The official explanations are largely consistent and plausible. Classical tradition, religious iconography, Masonic influence among founding fathers who were open about their membership. But symbols are not merely decorative. Symbols are communicative.
Symbols carry meaning, and that meaning can be intentional or absorbed, conscious or cultural, sincere or subversive. The question of what these symbols are saying, to whom, and why they are still being used is not an absurd question. It is an art historical question, a political science question, a semiotics question. It just happens to also be a conspiracy question. And the line between those categories is sometimes thinner than we would like. To fully understand the grip of secret society theories on the modern imagination, we need to step further back, not to the 18th century, to antiquity. Secret societies, or at least societies organized around hidden knowledge, initiation, and the selective sharing of power, are among the oldest documented social structures in human history. The mystery schools. In ancient Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries were a set of initiation ceremonies held every year at Eleusis, near Athens. These ceremonies, conducted in honor of the goddess Demeter and her daughter Persephone,
involved elaborate, multi-day rituals, culminating in a revelatory experience for initiates. The content of the final revelation was, and remains, completely unknown. Initiates took an oath of absolute secrecy that was so well observed that over 2,000 years of scholarship have not definitively uncovered what was experienced in the inner sanctuary. We know who attended: Plato, Cicero, Marcus Aurelius. We know it was considered the most important spiritual experience available in the ancient world. We do not know what happened inside. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a historical mystery. But it establishes something important: the architecture of hidden knowledge, the idea that truth is available only to the initiated, is not a modern invention. It is, in some form, as old as civilization itself. The Knights Templar.
Founded in 1119 to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem, the Knights Templar became one of the most powerful military and financial organizations in medieval Europe. At their height, the Templars operated a network of properties, banking operations, and military outposts across Europe and the Holy Land. They invented, or at least pioneered, the concept of letters of credit, a system that allowed pilgrims to deposit money in one country and withdraw it in another. In 1307, King Philip IV of France, who owed the Templars an enormous debt, orchestrated their destruction. Templars were arrested across France in a single day. They were tortured into confessing to heresy, idol worship, and secret rituals. Their leaders were burned at the stake. The order was suppressed by Pope Clement V in 1312. Whether any of those confessions were true is, historians agree, almost certainly irrelevant. They were extracted under torture. The charges were politically motivated. But the legend of the Templars, their secret rituals, their hidden treasures, their alleged guardianship of the Holy Grail, survived their physical destruction and became one of the foundational myths of Western conspiracy culture. The Freemasons later claimed descent from the Templars, though historians dispute this. The myth of the hidden, persecuted brotherhood with secret knowledge became a template repeated across centuries: the Rosicrucians. In the early 17th century, a series of manifestos appeared in Germany describing a secret brotherhood called the Rosicrucians, named after a mythical figure called Christian Rosenkreuz, whose tomb, according to the texts, had been opened to reveal occult wisdom. The manifestos caused an enormous intellectual sensation across Europe. Scholars, mystics, and scientists scrambled to make contact with the Brotherhood. No one could find them.
Some historians now believe the manifestos were a literary joke or a serious philosophical provocation, rather than a genuine announcement of a real society. Others believe a real group existed, if briefly. The effect was real regardless. The idea of an invisible college of enlightened adepts working in secret for the benefit of humanity became a recurring fantasy of European intellectual culture, and the some form it never quite left. The protocols. We must address this directly. In the early 20th century, a document called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was circulated, first in Russia, then across Europe and the world. It purported to be the minutes of a meeting of Jewish leaders planning global domination. It was a forgery. This was established definitively in 1921 by a journalist at the Times of London, who demonstrated that large sections had been plagiarized from an 1864 political satire with no connection to Judaism. Despite being thoroughly debunked for over a century, the document continues to circulate.
Its legacy is not philosophical, it is genocidal. The history of conspiracy theories about secret societies controlling the world cannot be told honestly without this chapter, because it demonstrates what happens when those theories are weaponized against an identifiable group. The harm is not abstract. It is measured in mass graves. This is why the question of how we engage with conspiracy theories, with what safeguards, what ethical guardrails, what historical awareness, matters. Not because questions about power are illegitimate, because some versions of those questions have been used deliberately to target and destroy innocent people. The mystery is real. The danger is equally real. In the age of the internet, the anatomy of conspiracy theories has changed. Not the theories themselves, they are largely the same ones that have circulated for centuries, but their velocity, their reach, their architecture. The acceleration.
Before the internet, a conspiracy theory spread through pamphlets, books, and word of mouth. It could take decades to reach a mass audience. Today, a theory can go from a niche forum post to a global trend in 48 hours. The algorithms that govern what we see on social media platforms are optimized for engagement. Engagement is driven by emotional arousal. Emotional arousal is most efficiently triggered by outrage, fear, and the sensation of secret revelation. The conspiracy theory is, from an algorithmic perspective, nearly perfect content. This does not mean the platforms are conspiring to spread misinformation. It means the incentive structures they have built, accidentally or deliberately, reward the kind of content that exploits human cognitive vulnerabilities. The QAnon experiment. Beginning in 2017, a phenomenon called QAnon emerged from the internet forum 4chan. An anonymous poster, claiming to be a high-level government official with Q clearance, began posting cryptic messages claiming that a secret cabal of satanic pedophiles controlled global governments and entertainment industries, and that Donald Trump had been recruited to secretly dismantle them. Within 3 years, QAnon had millions of followers across multiple continents. It influenced election interference attempts. It contributed to the January 6, 2021 storming of the U.S. Capitol. It was cited as a motivating factor in several violent incidents. QAnon contained elements of almost every classic conspiracy narrative: the Illuminati bloodline theory, the protocol's adjacent idea of a cabal controlling culture, the hidden savior narrative, the imminent revelation that will vindicate the believers. It also demonstrated something new: the participatory conspiracy theory. Followers were not merely consumers of a theory, they were players, decoding cryptic messages, proposing interpretations, building collective meaning.
This gamification of conspiracy belief made it uniquely resistant to debunking. Because the conspiracy was not a fixed claim, it was a living, evolving game. Every failed prediction became a new clue. Every piece of counter-evidence became proof of deeper deception. The irrefutability was not a bug, it was the point. The information ecology. We now live in what researchers call an epistemic crisis, a moment when the systems we use to establish shared truth have broken down. Trust in media is at historic lows in most Western democracies. Trust in government is at historic lows. Trust in scientific institutions, shaken by the politicization of public health during the pandemic, is at historic lows. In this environment, the conspiracy theory does not need to be more credible than the official explanation. It only needs to be equally credible, or to feel that way. And in a world where credibility is no longer anchored by shared institutional trust, feeling credible is increasingly the only standard that matters. This is the context in which the question, "Do secret societies control the world?" now circulates. Not as an idle curiosity, but as a live political question with real consequences.
We have come a long way, from the sun-baked hills of Bavaria in 1776 to the Yale campus in the 1830s, to the smoke-filled intelligence briefings of the Cold War, to the algorithm-sorted feeds of 2024. We have established that secret societies are real, documented, historical, undeniable. That they have, at various points, included some of the most powerful people in human history. That elite networks, less dramatic than secret societies, but arguably more consequential, demonstrably shape policy, wealth, and power in ways that are not fully transparent to the public. That governments have repeatedly done in secret what they denied doing.
That the human mind is not a neutral processor of evidence, but a meaning-making machine with powerful biases toward narrative, agency, and pattern. We have also established that there is no confirmed evidence of a single unified secret society exercising coordinated control over global governments, economies, and cultures. That the mathematical and sociological probability of such a conspiracy remaining secret at global scale is extremely low. That many of the most compelling conspiracy observations about elite networks, about concentrated power, about the gap between public rhetoric and private decision-making have entirely non-conspiratorial explanations. And yet, none of that is quite the end of it, because the truth we have uncovered, the non-conspiratorial truth, is, in its own way, deeply unsettling. Power is real. It is concentrated. It operates in significant part beyond democratic oversight. The people who hold it know each other. They protect each other's interests. They make decisions that affect billions of people without those people's meaningful input. And they have, historically, demonstrated the willingness to lie, to experiment on civilians, to assassinate, to surveil, when they believed it served their interests. You do not need a secret society for that. You need money, and institutional power, and the human tendency to protect what you have. The conspiracy theory, in some sense, lets power off the hook, because if there is a hidden cabal, a single enemy, then exposing them would solve the problem. But if the problem is structural, woven into the fabric of how power accumulates, how institutions protect themselves, how networks of privilege self-perpetuate, then there is no single enemy to expose. There is only the slow, difficult, unglamorous work of reform, of transparency, of accountability, of building institutions that are genuinely responsive to the people they claim to represent.
That is less dramatic than a secret society. It is also, possibly, more frightening, because the dramatic version promises a revelation, a moment when everything becomes clear. The structural version promises only effort and uncertainty, and the distinct possibility that the systems we are working within are not designed to serve us, without anyone having explicitly planned it that way. So what do we conclude? We conclude that the question, do secret societies control the world, is not quite the right question. The right question might be, what does it mean to control the world? And who has the most influence over that process? The answer to that question is complex. It is documented. It is not hidden. It is just difficult to look at directly. The answer involves the wealthiest individuals and institutions on Earth. It involves the policy frameworks they fund and the politicians they support. It involves the revolving doors between government and industry. It involves the educational networks that reproduce elite culture. It involves the information systems that shape what most people believe is possible. These are not secrets. They are, in most cases, publicly documented. The most powerful conspiracy in the world may not be the one being hidden. It may be the one hiding in plain sight, visible, studied, documented, And somehow, despite all of that, largely unchanged. So ask yourself, if not a secret society, then what? And if the answer to that question is less satisfying than a room with a shadowy figure at the head of a long table, what does that tell us about what we want to be true? What does it tell us about what we are willing to look at? And what does it tell us about what, for whatever reason, we would rather not see? The documents exist. The networks are real. The power is concentrated. What connects them, and who benefits, is the question no single documentary can answer.
It depends on where you look and what you choose to follow.